This is Soren here with the Celtic Phoenix. I'm here with John Ostrander, comic book writer for DC, Marvel, First Comics.
Yep, Dark Horse, Star Wars.
We're here at Comicpalooza 2016, and well, let me, I guess, start with this. I was looking up some information on you, and I was on Wikipedia, and I actually saw something interesting. It says you originally were, you studied theology with a interest in going into the priesthood.
Well, okay, I probably should clarify that a bit. I spent the freshman year of high school in a preparatory seminary, and I went there because I thought I had a vocation, and I discovered actually what I had was an overdose to the TV series Going My Way. That said, yes, I have had an interest in theology, among my other interests. The whole question of redemption, salvation, sin. I was raised Catholic, so that's, I was spoon-fed that from an early age.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not bringing up like religion or stuff like that, but it's an interesting thing because it's interesting to see how people get into comic writing or what interests them to get them into doing like writing or comic art as a profession. And well, even though you spend just that small time looking at that, but I'm pretty sure it also helped you with not necessarily ideas, but see bigger picture things and stuff like that.
Yeah, it may be. I've always, I started reading at a very early age, and being raised Catholic in the era before Vatican II, it was very ritual based, and so I've always been interested in ritual and how people treat it. But I guess it's just, if you follow where your own interest and where your mind leads you, and led me to a lot of different places, including the fact that I'm no longer religious. I'm actually more of an agnostic these days.
And what about the comic industry would say actually started to bring you towards that field? Like thinking, oh, I want to do this as a profession.
Well, I loved comics for a long, long time. My mom believed Dr. Wortham in Seduction of the Innocent, so we weren't allowed superhero comics, which meant, of course, it was forbidden fruit, and I had to read them as often as possible. But I was exposed to all kinds of comics back then, ranging from, I saw some of Will Eisner's Spirit when Harvey Comics gathered 2 big volumes of them when I was very young. So I know that had an influence on me. So I just loved comics for a long time. And before I got into comics, I actually got into theater. But there too, that's the question of storytelling, how well you tell storytelling. I think a very large influence in my doing comics was the time I spent in theater. And I spent a long time in theater. Through most of my high school, all of my college, post-college. I was in theater in Chicago, and that's a time when a lot of people were coming up. David Mamet, the playwright, was just starting out in Chicago. Gary Sinise, John Malkovich were both there starting off. And you still had Second City as well, and Del Close, who later on would become my writing partner, was the director and teacher at Second City for 20 years. So I think that theater has had a large influence in terms of my writing. It taught me story structure, it taught me how dialogue is used as action. So, and along the way I met my good friend Mike Gold. And Mike Gold liked what I did as a playwright. And when he started up a theater company, knowing that I loved comics, or excuse me, not a theater company, a comic book company, First Comics, he decided to give me a shot and see what I would do within the comics form. And that's basically how I slipped into comics. When people ask me, well, how do you get started? My general answer is, I have no idea.
On the page where I said you had studied theology.
Yeah.
It also said that you were in writing theater writing, and then they like one of the plays that you had worked on, or some of that became one of the that got. They decided they want to make that into a comic book, and that's how you got into it first.
Yeah, actually, what happened there was that there was this science fiction trilogy comic book in Chicago at the Organic Theater, and it was called Warp. I didn't have a hand in it, but I was a huge fan of it. I went to the first episode so often that the playwright saw me come in one night and said, "Are you here again?" But a very good friend of mine, Bill Norris, was also in the company and acted that. So I loved it, big time. And the first comic that First Comics was going to do was an adaptation of Warp Comics. Mike, knowing that I was a big fan of not only comics, but also I knew Warp so well that he thought he might give me a shot at writing a backup feature for it, featuring one of the characters in it. So he gave me the assignment. I started working on a plot. I sent it to him. He sent it back to me with notes, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, he calls and says, "Well, congratulations. We're going to publish your story in the back of our first issue." And I said, "That's great. Am I going to get paid for this?" And he said, "Yes, you chump." So that's basically my first work in comics.
That's one way to get into comic books.
Yeah.
Someone actually just come up to you because you see their play a lot.
Yeah. And then I also wrote or co-wrote a play for that same company called Bloody Bess, along with my friend Bill Norris, who, as I said, was already part of it. And Mike Gold loved Bloody Bess, and he came to that one many, many times. So he knew I could write. At least for theater, he wanted to see if I could write for comics.
So, now that we've gotten into your comic book career, I guess some of the works you're probably more known for is Firestorm. How did you get onto that book?
When Mike moved over to DC, he decided he would take me with him, along with some other people that worked at First Comics. I didn't leave First Comics, but he gave me a toehold there at DC. And the first book that I did was I plotted a book called Legends, which was the first company-wide crossover since Crisis on Infinite Earth, which was a big deal. Len Wein would script it, and John Byrne would just go marvelous drawing it, and that was also a big deal. And from it, also we launched Suicide Squad, which was one of the books that I did. But they had books that crossed over into it, and Jerry Conway at the time, the creator of Firestorm, was still writing the book, and he decided he didn't want to do those two issues. So I was asked if I would do them, since I knew the Legends plot and would find an easy way to make it work within that whole thing. So I did. And then a couple issues after that, Jerry decided he was no longer going to do Firestorm. And since they liked what I had done for the Legends crossover, they asked if I wanted to write the continuing story. And that Firestorm was really my first ongoing book, even before Suicide Squad.
As you just brought up, you created Suicide Squad,
right?
Which obviously is now, which has become popular, and then we're now with the movie is exploding.
Yeah.
You said brought them together in Legends. How did, or maybe those who haven't read Legends and probably really don't have much of an interest, I guess, how did you come about bringing like that idea of Suicide Squad together?
Well, we wanted to make Legends different than Crisis. Crisis sort of blew apart the DC universe. We were trying to bring it back together. Also, it was a smaller book, and the idea was that they would launch several new books from it. One of which would be a new version of The Flash, one of which would be a new version of Justice League, and the third one would be Suicide Squad. Now, I got involved with Suicide Squad because I was talking with Robert Greenberger, an editor over there, about doing something at DC. And I had wanted to do a book called Challengers of the Unknown, which I loved. I thought it was a great title. But he said somebody else had it. So he said, well, look, we have this old title called Suicide Squad. Only 5 issues of it ever appeared in a book called Showcase. And you can do whatever you want with it. And I said, Suicide Squad? What a stupid name. It would belong to anything that belonged to a Suicide Squad. Why would you join one? And then I went off and thought about it. And the idea was, well, people who don't have much choice. Well, who don't have much choice? Prisoners might not. Someone in prison and the DC universe would be supervillains. Okay. So now we got supervillains, maybe being forced to go on a covert missions to benefit the U.S. And so basically, it's supervillains meets the Dirty Dozen. And I sold it on that, and we proceeded to put it together and get it out there.
Have you kept touches on what they've done with the Suicide Squad since you stopped writing?
I tend not to read books that I've left because I generally have had the freedom to go do what I want with a book, and I think that those who are currently creating it have the right to do the same thing without my breathing over their shoulder. And this way, if somebody asks me, well, what do you think, I can legitimately say, I haven't read it.
With the new movie coming out, have you do you find yourself being talked about more, or like coming to the forefront in like normal conversations now, where maybe you like kind of dropped off maybe slightly?
Yeah, actually, after I finished, I was working on Star Wars when the rights went over to Disney because and back to Marvel. And so that year, 2014, I was having trouble getting work. But this year, not so much. And also, as with you, there's several more people wanting to do interviews and podcasts because, yeah, my name comes up. And even DC has given me a one-shot with Suicide Squad that'll be out in August. So yeah, I'm getting more work, getting more attention. It's what got me flown down here to Houston, I bet.
Other than what we talked about, the big popular stuff that everyone's going to ask you about and wonder about, what about your career that you don't normally get to talk about that you're very proud of, that most people just gloss over or don't even ask, that you don't get to talk about a lot of?
In terms of current work, one thing that I think is interesting that's happened is I've gotten involved in the Kickstarter movement, and I've been part of 2 successful Kickstarters. One with my old Spectre artist, Tom Mandrake. He also drew some of the Firestorm issues that you had, that I signed to there. And we're doing something called Cross, K-R-O-S, Hallowed Ground, and it combines one part, it takes place during the Battle of Gettysburg in the Civil War, and you have the Battle of Gettysburg during the day, and then vampires at night. Because the idea is, if there are vampires, they would come to feed on the wounded. And that to me actually made kind of sense. With Star Wars, my main artistic partner for 10 years was Jan Durson. And she and I have created a character called Hexer Dusk, which is going to be another space-faring story. It's going to have spaceships and horror, comedy, and magic. And we just completed the Kickstarter for that. And that is something that we plan to have finished now by the end of the year. The reason I think that's interesting is Kickstarter allows creators to actually keep all their rights on it. So, in other words, if somebody had an interest in doing something else, movie, television, whatever, with either of those properties, Tom and I control them. We would control who has them. We would have the input into those that we might not otherwise have. and we would garner more money from them than is normal. One of the interesting things about Kickstarters is that the creators have to do all the work themselves. I mean, you have to do the work, you have to get the promotion out there, you have to arrange for the publishing, printing, and so on. So you appreciate what the publishers do, mainly because we're our own publishers, and that's a lot of work, but it's worthwhile in the end because again, you own the rights, you control what happens with it.
Anything else you?
One project that I've done in the past that I have a great deal of fondness with that maybe isn't always talked about is a historical Western that I did at DC called The Kents. And I'm very proud of that. That's set pre-Civil War, Civil War, and then post-Civil War. And the idea is how did Clark Kent's adopted family come to be in Kansas in the first place? And in doing the research, I realized the whole dress rehearsal for the Civil War was in Kansas before it became a state. During the Civil War, there was action, and very violent, nasty action in Kansas. In fact, Jesse James simply applied things that he learned fighting with Quantrell during the Civil War. It was a guerrilla group, and they rode under the black flag, and they were considered outlaws even by the Confederates. After the Civil War, most of the stuff that we associate with Western war, like the walking down the street at noon and the cow towns, we might think of those Texas or further west. Those were all Kansas. Abilene, Ellsworth, Dodge City. Those are all cow towns in Kansas at the time. So the cow drives came out of Texas and went up, came out of Texas and up to Kansas. So I did a lot of research. I got a lot of factual history in it, to the point where I've even received letters from a professor in college who used it as part of his course. So I'm proud of that.
That's very interesting. I mean, I know a little bit about that. There's also a good movie about Quantrell and them. It's called Ride with the Devil. It's like Jeffrey Wright. I think Kelly McGuire has a small role in there, and the singer Joel's in it. I guess that's it for today.
Okay.
It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope your con's been going well, and that the rest of your con today goes well as well.
It's been going very nicely. The fans have been very, very nice, very, very friendly.
And I guess what's your opinion of Houston from what you've seen? What little you've seen?
Well, I've seen my hotel and I've seen the convention hall, and so far my impression is Houston is hot and I could melt out there. But I hope to get back at some point and actually see a little bit of Houston. But I'm enjoying the convention a lot, and like I said, the people here are very welcoming, very nice.
Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.